Imagine a world without money. No coins, notes, banks, or digital payments. Yet humans still needed to exchange things. They needed food, tools, clothing, and shelter. So humans created a remarkably simple solution. Something almost everyone would agree to accept. That solution became what we call money. But why did humans need it? The answer begins with a surprisingly difficult problem. What happens when two people want different things? This problem is called the double coincidence. You have something I want, but you may not want what I have. So the trade simply cannot happen. Now imagine this happening every day. Trade would become incredibly slow. People needed a common middle ground, something everyone could accept. That changed human exchange forever. But what could become that common medium? Humans chose things that felt valuable. Sometimes those things were surprisingly ordinary. Shells became valuable in many ancient societies. Why would a shell become money? Because everyone agreed it was useful. Money works because people trust the system. Without trust, money becomes useless. So money is partly a shared agreement. But trust alone was not enough. People also needed money to be practical. It needed to survive everyday handling. It needed to be easy to carry. It needed to be easy to recognize. And ideally, it could be divided. Some objects worked better than others. That is why ancient money looked so strange. Salt could become valuable enough to trade. Grain could serve a similar purpose. But grain had one serious weakness. It could spoil, disappear, or attract pests. Metal solved many of those problems. It was durable, portable, and recognizable. Then humans discovered another powerful idea. Money could be made into standard shapes. That made counting value much easier. Now people could compare prices. And trade became much more flexible. But metal itself was not enough. People needed confidence about its value. That confidence depended on everyone else. Then came one of history's biggest transformations. People began stamping official marks. That mark promised something important. The coin had an accepted value. Now something fascinating happened. Money stopped being just a useful object. It became a symbol of shared trust. And trust allowed economies to grow. People could now trade across greater distances. And that changed civilization itself. Markets began connecting strangers together. Someone could sell something far away, then use the money somewhere else. Distance became less important for trade. Specialization became easier too. Not everyone had to make everything. Someone could focus on one useful skill. Others could pay for that skill. This created more complex economies. But money created a new problem. Money could now be stored for later. Saving changed how people planned ahead. You could work today and spend tomorrow. That made future planning much easier. Money also became a way to measure wealth. Suddenly, wealth could be compared. And comparison changed human behavior. Some people began accumulating more than others. Others had very little to save. Money had solved one problem. But it created an entirely new question. Who gets to control the money? That question changed societies again. Authorities could guarantee standardized money. Standardization made trust even stronger. But it also created dependence. Without accepted money, trade could slow. So people had to protect confidence. And that meant protecting the coins. Money was becoming more than metal. It represented something humans could believe in. That belief could connect entire communities. Trade became a social relationship. And societies became increasingly interconnected. But there was another hidden power. Money could influence human decisions. People could reward useful work. People could also delay rewards. That changed how humans thought about tomorrow. Money had entered the human imagination. Yet money was never just about buying things. It also became a language of value. People could express worth with numbers. And numbers made comparison powerful. Soon, debt entered the story too. You could receive something before paying. And promise became economically useful. But promises require something money also needs. They require trust in the future. And that made trust even more valuable. Then governments became part of the system. They could decide what money meant. And they could control its supply. That gave money enormous social power. But money could also fail. If people stop believing, value disappears. That is money's deepest secret. Money is valuable because we believe it is. And everyone else must believe too. That idea still shapes our world today. Today, money can exist without physical form. But the underlying idea remains unchanged. We still exchange value through shared trust. And that trust has extraordinary consequences. It lets millions cooperate without knowing each other. That is something barter could never easily accomplish. Money turned strangers into trading partners, and partners could build larger communities. Eventually, money helped organize entire civilizations, and all of it began with agreement. But agreement alone could not guarantee fairness. People still had to decide what was fair. That depended on culture and circumstance. Value was never completely objective. It depended partly on what people needed and what people expected tomorrow. That made money surprisingly psychological. Humans did not merely count money. They imagined what money could become. And that imagination changed human history. Money also changed how people measured success. Having more could signal greater status. That created new social differences. Some could save while others struggled. Money could create opportunity, but it could also create dependence. So money became both tool and challenge. Yet humans kept using it because the advantages were enormous. Money made cooperation scalable. Yet scaling cooperation created new risks. More transactions meant more opportunities for mistakes. People needed records to remember agreements, and records made economies more organized. Eventually, written contracts appeared. A promise could now be recorded. That made trust less dependent on memory, and that allowed larger deals. Money was becoming part of administration, and administration changed civilization again. Taxes became easier to collect. Governments could gather resources, and resources could support public projects. Money was becoming infrastructure, but infrastructure needed constant cooperation, and cooperation required shared rules. Rules helped protect confidence. Without confidence, transactions could collapse. So trust became part of the economy, and that trust still follows money today. Then money became a way to store value. People could save today for tomorrow. That changed how humans planned ahead. Saving created a bridge between time. But stored value could also lose value. Scarcity could change what money bought, and abundance could change it too. So prices became signals. They told people what was becoming scarce and what was becoming abundant. Prices also helped strangers make decisions. They did not need complete information. A single number carried useful information. That made distant trade much easier. Trade routes began connecting entire regions, and regions began depending on each other. Specialization became more practical. People could focus on what they did best, and trade connected their different skills. That increased what communities could produce. But greater production created greater wealth, and wealth could become concentrated. That created new forms of power. Money could influence who controlled resources, and resources could influence political decisions. So money became deeply political. Yet ordinary people still needed it, because daily life depended on exchange, and exchange depended on trust, and trust remained money's foundation. Yet money's greatest power remained invisible. It exists because humans collectively believe, and belief can build entire civilizations. But belief can disappear surprisingly quickly. That makes money strangely fragile. Yet humans repeatedly rebuilt that trust, because exchanging value solved enormous problems. It let strangers cooperate at scale, and that changed human history forever. So why did humans invent money? Not simply because coins were convenient. They invented a shared language of value, a language understood by complete strangers. And that may be money's greatest achievement. Money made cooperation feel almost effortless. Every coin carried a human agreement, and that agreement still surrounds us. Every time we exchange, we participate. So next time you spend money, remember, you're holding thousands of years of trust. History hides secrets inside ordinary things. Which ordinary object should we uncover next? Tell me your choice in the comments. Like the video if you learned something new. Subscribe, because the next mystery is even stranger.